In our business impact analysis, this is where we identify which systems are critical and which are not, which functions we can be without and which we cannot have down. And the criticality of a system is determined by if it's considered unacceptable to have any disruption. And here, as with anything else we do in IT security, the acceptability is determined by the cost of the recovery. If you go to senior management and say, hey, how long is this system okay to be down? They're probably going to tell you, no time at all. We need it up at all times. This is mission critical. Then if you tell them, all right, we can do that, but it's going to cost $40 million to build the disaster recovery site, have the true redundancy they're asking for to ensure that all systems are up at all times. Now they might come back with, well, we're okay with maybe half an hour downtime, or something like that. It is also possible that a function or a system has to be considered critical because it's dictated by law. This could be patient records. Once we have identified all our critical systems, functional activities, we assign them two values. The recovery point objective is the acceptable amount of data that cannot be recovered. If the system crashes now and we have to restore it, how much is acceptable for us to lose? If our backup system is configured to back up once every week, then we have accepted that we have up to an entire week of data loss. If it is a critical system, we might have zero data loss acceptancy. For each of the system's functions and activities, we assign them an RPO. We also find the maximum tolerable downtime, and this is the maximum amount of time the system function or activity can be down before we are severely impacted. And luckily, on the exam, all of these are spelled out. You may see the abbreviation MTD, but it will also say maximum tolerable downtime. And I would know all of these, just like I would know any of the other abbreviations on the system exam. If you remember back to when I told you about the organizations that had made the data losses, 43% never opened, 29% closed within 2 years. That's almost 3 in 4. And it is possible that it went through the BIA and something completely unexpected happened. But my assumption is most of those never did. They never went through the exercise of figuring out what's truly important and how do we protect it. You may in some of the other materials see different abbreviations or different terms for the maximum tolerable downtime, but as far as I know, the exam only uses MTD. Some of the other abbreviations could be maximal allowable downtime, maximal tolerable outage, maximum acceptable outage, and maximal tolerable period of disruption. So just know all of these mean the same thing, but on the exam you should only see the maximum tolerable downtime. And our maximum tolerable downtime is made up by two variables, the RTO and WRT. Recovery time objective, how long will it take us to restore the system hardware? And the work recovery time is how long is it going to take us after we restore the hardware to restore the software. And the recovery time objective plus the work recovery time has to be equal to or less than the maximum tolerable downtime. If our maximum tolerable downtime is 3 hours and it's going to take us 2 hours to get the system back online and 2 hours to install and configure the software, we're past our maximum tolerable downtime. They have to be equal or less than. We already talked about the mean time between failure. This is how long a system or a component of the system will normally function before it on average fails. That doesn't mean that we can't have a hard disk that has a mean time between failure of 3 years, but it lasts 7. It is the average. How often, on average, do they break? And knowing this will give us an idea of how many spares we need on hand and how often we can expect hardware to fail. The mean time to repair should not be confused with the maximum tolerable downtime. Mean time to repair is how long, on average, does it take us to recover a failed system. Keyword here is mean, which just means average. And the mean time to repair should not be too close to the maximum tolerable downtime. If it takes us 2 hours to repair a system on average, that also means sometimes it might take us 4 hours. If it takes us 4 hours and our maximum tolerable downtime is 3, we need to find ways where we can cut that time down. And finally, we talk about the minimum operating requirements. What are the minimum requirements we can run the system we need on for a limited period of time? For normal full operations, we might require a certain amount of air conditioning, a certain amount of network connection, a certain amount of memory, a certain amount of CPU, but for disaster recovery, we might require much less. How much is just enough to keep the lights on until we can recover fully? So remember, RPO, or recovery point objective, how much data is acceptable not to recover. Maximum tolerable downtime, the absolute maximum that we can have a system down before we're severely impacted. And that's made up by the RTO, recovery time objective. How long does it take us to get the hardware back up? How long does it take us to get the software up? Those two have to be equal to or less than the maximum tolerable downtime. Mean time between failure makes sense. On average, how often do these components fail? Mean time to repair also makes sense. How long, on average, will it take us to recover a failed system? And then minimum operating requirements. What is the least spec we can get away with and still run the system on the functionality that we need to?